Well, we're now entering the final lecture, and we're continuing the theme of the previous one, where we're looking at the business opportunities of sustainability. And last lecture we talked about innovation challenges for new energy and energy efficiency and those sort of market areas, as well as ethical markets. This time we're going to look at 5 remaining sectors where businesses can find a market or an opportunity from thinking in sustainability terms. The first one is to mesh with government policies on sustainability. Second is eco-design. Then we'll look at sustainable organisations. Then an economic and social sustainability called bottom of the pyramid. And finally, how can ecosystems and businesses interact? So firstly, let's talk about government policies. How can they create businesses for business opportunities for sustainability? Well, the main example is the various targets for reducing greenhouse gas emissions, which you can find around the world. The 3 examples I've got on this slide are the UK, which has a fairly ambitious target for reducing emissions by 34% by 2020 and by 80% by 2050. The UK is one of the few countries which has actually converted that target into law. So it is actually a legal obligation that the government has to try and achieve. The European Union as a whole, the EU, has its own target, which is not as big as the UK, but it's 20% by 2020. And Japan is a rather interesting case because the reduction is quite political, and the previous, the Aso government had a fairly mild target, not very ambitious target, which was probably basically written by the Keidan Ren. And when the Minshuto government came in under Hatoyama, they suddenly increased the target to 25%, but without really thinking about how that could be included. But if the government has a fixed target, a very firm target, then that actually sets opportunities for businesses to try and contribute to that target. So if the CO2 emissions are going to have to come down by 34%, then if your company is actually creating new energy or energy efficient services, then its market is going to be stronger as a result of government policy. What are the sort of individual targets we can show that follow from these types of policies? Well, this is the actual UK detailed policy. In 2008, when the policy started, or where the law started, the UK had already achieved a 21% reduction. It needs to increase that to 34% by 2020. And it does this by having 3 major targets in 3 stages, 3 budgets, one up to 2012, one 2013 to 2017, one 2018 to 2022, and each one of these 5-year plans has a carbon budget which must be achieved. How do we achieve that? Well, these are the various strategies. One is to increase the amount of electricity generated from renewable sources and to reduce your reliance on coal or gas. And the main targets there are wind power, trying to get some energy from the sea, like Japan. The UK is surrounded by the sea, and that is a potential energy source. Then geothermal is also under consideration. Of course, in Japan, geothermal is a very promising source. In the UK, it's rather weak. And also nuclear is very important to try and ensure that you can meet these reduction targets. Without nuclear, you're going to have to use gas and create a lot of CO2, or even worse, you're going to have to use coal and create even more CO2. And then we also hope that eventually we'll be able to develop an efficient and economic way of capturing CO2 from the emissions of thermal power stations and reduce CO2 emissions that way. So the whole of the electricity generation field gives you a lot of opportunities. We've seen a huge increase in the wind power industry. We've seen a lot of R&D in these sectors, as well as a commitment to replace the existing nuclear reactors and creation of a very large market in terms of new nuclear power. In industry, business is being affected by a system to put a cap on CO2 emissions and allow companies to trade carbon credits between them. That creates a market. Then in the household area, there's a big increase in the amount of insulation being fitted, smart meters, household generation like cogeneration, and like some of the systems I mentioned in the previous lecture. In transport, a trend towards low fuel consumption, electric vehicles, try to deal with the very large amounts of CO2 emitted from aircraft by using carbon credits. And we also need to reduce emissions from agriculture. Agriculture is a source of a number of greenhouse gases, nitrogen oxides and methane. So improving the way we manage our agriculture, particularly livestock, is also part of the strategy. So all these create opportunities for businesses to innovate and develop new products and services which help reduce greenhouse gas emissions. If we look at the USA doesn't actually have a specific reduction target, but under the Obama presidency they have made green energy a major target, and that's created a lot of government-supported investment in low energy, new energy, particularly solar in the case of the USA. There are measures to make a smart grid so you can be much more efficient in the way you use electrical generation. There's a lot of research into new batteries, and electric cars are also entering the market. So these have also result of government policy which create opportunities or funding for new companies. If we come back to the case of Japan, the original target by the previous LDP government of only 8% leads one to make the comment that this actually doesn't create an incentive for Japanese companies to innovate to be more sustainable. It doesn't create funding or market opportunities for companies to be more efficient or to reduce their CO2 emissions. Therefore, what one is going to see is that Japanese technological leadership in the low energy or new energy field will be weakened by Korea, USA and also maybe China, because the government does not have a strong enough policy driving the company's innovation and priorities. So if you look at the Minshuto target, which was brought in under Hatoyama, of 25%, then that places Japan in the same area as Europe and USA. But of course now we have a new government under Abe. This 25% target is one of the first things to be reviewed, and I rather suspect that they will reduce the target and therefore weaken the incentives for Japan innovation to be more sustainable. However, if you look at the longer term, Japan has a number of visions on the future development of a more sustainable economy, more sustainable society. This is the one that comes from Ministry of Environment, Kankyosho, And it has a number of visions related to the way we organise our public services, the way we manage our local environment and our forestry, the way we apply green technologies and try and encourage green consumers to think of the environment when they buy their products, and move towards greener transport with electric vehicles and better recycling. Here's the same slide in English. That's a vision of like a green consumer and green local communities. Then we have a vision which includes green innovation, new renewable energy sources, Japan creating new energy technologies which are world leading, Japan using its technologies to encourage green innovation in Asia as a whole. And these are all areas which create opportunities for companies to create new products and new markets. However, note in this case, these are not areas which are receiving government funding, and therefore companies have to make their own decisions based on normal economic targets. Overall, what is the effect of these green policies, or what is the target of these effects? Well, the 2009 policy statement on green economy said that by encouraging innovation, encouraging companies to develop greener products, and encouraging the green consumer, they hoped to double the size of the green economy by 2020 to 120 trillion, and double the number of people working in that economy from 1.4 million to 2.8 million. So there's very much a target which is to try and make Japan more sustainable, but also encourage its economy at the same time through these broad strategies of improved technology, improved planning, improved consumers, and improved recycling. These all should make companies that produce goods and services in these environmentally sector fields, they should make their markets more successful. If you're in a company and you're looking for new ideas of markets or products or services, then you can look at some of these future visions to maybe give you some ideas as to what might be a good product to actually develop. This is another of the Environment Ministry's visions for transport in the future, and you see here a range of targets which all reduce the amount of energy and CO2 that we emit by moving around. So here you have logistics, efficient logistics which reduce emissions during transport. You have low carbon electricity, so the electricity you use hasn't produced so much CO2. You have environmentally conscious planning and businesses, and next generation fuels. You have cities which are designed to be easy to use without a car, rather different from Sendai where you need a car to do anything. But this type of planning makes it much easier to move from where you are to where you want to go without using the car by pedestrianly friendly planning or good public transport. Then you have labelling to try and make it easier for the consumer to be environmentally friendly. Then you have a number of visions which you can see, a number of trends which you can see in the home and office area. You can see again the same sort of effects on labelling, next generation fuels, local renewable sources of energy, and you need to have a lot of good insulation and sustainable building materials. Also in your house, instead of buying something which is flown in from America or South America, if you can use local food from Miyagi Prefecture or from Fukushima Prefecture, then again you reduce the amount of energy and CO2 emitted. So these are all models of the future environmentally friendly lifestyle that companies can use to get them ideas as to how to develop their new products. There's a similar vision for industrial revolution, low energy industry, which again includes very much the same type of components as we just talked about in the home and office sector. One area where Japan has got a new policy which is actually driving company behavior and innovation is the energy sector, the new energy sector. You remember in last week, the last lecture I did about the growth of photovoltaics or solar panels, I pointed out the relationship between the development of the technology on the one hand and the government policy on the other, and pointed out that when Japan changed its policy and made it weaker, the amount of renewable energy or solar power also declined. Whereas when Germany changed its policy and made it stronger, then the amount of solar panels increased a lot. So 2 years ago, Japan did actually change its system and implemented a new program called feed-in tariff, which makes it much more attractive to people to install solar panels. And the target here is to reclaim Japan's position as the world's greatest generator of photovoltaic power. As they point out here, that between 2003 and 2007, Germany managed to double the amount of solar panels installed compared with Japan, and one of the reasons was it had a very tough renewable energy target and a very efficient economic incentive in the terms of a feed-in tariff. At the time, Japan's target was only 10% instead of 30%, very weak target, and that's why Japan had not grown in this sector as fast as Germany. Well, following the disaster of 2 years ago, the government did actually change that target and increase it quite a lot, and introduce this feed-in tariff system. So you're now seeing a growth in the installation of solar panels in Japan, and you'll also see a growth in other forms of renewable energy as a result of this new policy. Another area where Japan does have a very strong position, again, as I mentioned in the last lecture, the eco-labeling and the Top Runner program have encouraged Japanese companies to reduce the amount of energy used in their appliances, the refrigerators, the air conditioners, microwaves, the TV sets have all become much more efficient, helped by the Top Runner program. And most of you may remember that following the financial shock of 2008, when demand for new appliances went down, Japan introduced this Eco Point system, which again helped increase the demand for Japanese appliances, which were highly efficient. So that again helped green home appliances and try and develop some combination of economic advantages as well as environmental friendliness. Well, before we go on to the next subject of eco-design, let's just take a very short break, and then we'll return to talk about eco-design.